This past Friday was the season finale of Dexter Resurrection, and what a 10 episode run they had for its 10th mainline season. Honestly, every episode was a banger, leaving fans excited for each week to come. I, for one, very much enjoyed the twists, the turns, the revelations, the swerves, and I said all along that this felt like the Dexter of old, and as far as I'm concerned, was the best season that we've had since season 7. Lest we forget that we live now in something of a golden age with Dexter, because there was a time, and fans remember it well, that it wasn't all sunshine and rainbows, and there were dark days for Dexter, especially when we commiserate and remember how the show had initially ended off as. So, it's no secret that the original Dexter finale was no one's cup of tea. But it wasn't just the climax, the closing scene, or even the last episode. With rare exception, Season 8 was just failing at every single level. Nothing was popping for that season, for those string of episodes. Week to week viewing was becoming a strain. And then, well, the note that the show ended up on didn't leave a bad taste in everyone's mouth as much as it did the sensation, the realization that the show had one of the worst endings of all time, and that was until Game of Thrones. In the years since, the reputation and the squandered potential really had gotten to the writing staff, to the point that the decision was made to do the unthinkable, to actually bring the show back, and this time end it on a suitable final note. If they couldn't rewrite history, then they would at least end things on better terms. One season renewal, one prequel series, and here we were in the show's 4th iteration. I guess you just can't keep a good show down. Dexter has finally recovered once more before, but now it was time for a revival unlike all others, a resurrection, if you will. Fast forward to this latest incarnation, season 10, so to speak. Now, the show had obviously been called Resurrection, with obvious allusions to biblical rebirth, but for me, it wasn't until episode 1 with the scene with the 3 ghosts that really got the cogs in my imagination turning. Dexter's visitors of 3 souls from his past reminded me of a fan fiction that I had once written.
And isn't there some rule about these things ending after the 3rd ghost?
This brought me back to the show's original finale. As cathartic as the show had always been for fans, I had written my own fiction as a catharsis for the poor quality of what we all thought would be the season 8 closing chapter. I envisioned Dexter retracing his steps and facing his past. This journey, though, would take place in the theater of the mind. Miami would be reimagined as a hellscape, riddled with crime and squalor, filled with the dredges of the criminal element, to the point that they would make up the city's majority population. In something of a class reunion, Dexter would cross paths once more with old foes and familiar faces. But there's one caveat. Instead of a passive observer, you would join as an active participant, because this retelling would be as a video game. I thought to myself, we had seen 8 seasons of what this show could show us on the small screen. What if we were to stay right there, but this time as an immersive experience through console gaming. This was my way of giving the series the send-off that the franchise and, frankly, the fans deserved. You could call it a redemption.
Like our Savior, sometimes you have to go through hell to achieve resurrection.
And just like that, I decided I would dedicate a live stream as a pitch meeting of sorts for not just my own piece of Dexter lore, but what I would envision as an interactive experience where America's favorite serial killer would retrace his past, reacquaint himself with his old friends and old foes, and battle his way out of a hell of his own design. I present to you Dexter's Inferno. I am Inkarnate, and I'll be playing your ferryman down the river Styx in this video game pitch. Before I go any further, let's take an express elevator to hell. And how's about we hear from our resident guardian angel, Sergeant Dokes?
Subscribe.
Are you following me now?
So, with all that being said, a couple of caveats. Because this pitch was, keep in mind, done and written after season 8, it'll only be constrained between those two seasons. So no new blood, no original sin, no resurrection. Furthermore, the rules of the game were as follows. Each challenge faced is a revelation of Dexter, leaning more towards salvation, but every contest lost is a step closer to damnation in the form of becoming more like the animals that he preys upon. If Dexter is the Showtime Network's Batman, then think of his Inferno as Arkham Asylum. That being said, one more thing.
Abandon all hope, ye who enter here.
So, first up, we have Emmett Meridian. If you remember, this was the season 1 therapist who was convincing his patients to commit to self-delete. So, if anyone has ever read the story of Dante's Inferno, you know that King Minos is the guardian to the entrance of perdition. So, not only was this therapist integral in convincing female patients to bump themselves off, if you remember, he was the psychiatrist that first unlocked Dexter's mental block of the shipping container, where he was found as a child. Thus, it is this repressed memory of being born in blood that opens the gates to Dexter's mind and our story. I always felt that the character of Miguel Prado was very underrated and underutilized. Season 3 was a good season and a good follow-up to the Bay Harbor Butcher story. However, I always looked at Miguel Prado as the Two-Face of the Dexter universe. He, with his connections to politics and law, he made the perfect Harvey Dent, and complete with his own dark side. So, in Dexter's Inferno, he is the face of the sin of greed. He's running not just City Hall, but the city of Miami. He's put up a bounty inviting all serial killers, murderers, and gang members, Florida's finest. You will see him gain possession of Dexter's slides, and now every last one of them has come to life through their blood. Given Miguel's connection to the political world, he to me, was always such an underrated villain because I felt that he was someone who not only had a taste for blood himself, but he could be that presence who's now crossed over into the criminal world. And now, what if he's hiring serial killers much the way he did, but like an entire group of them as his hit force, his hit squad? You know what I mean? And now that vision could be realized in this hellish version of the Magic City. So, it is initially believed that Miguel has placed a reward on Dexter's head, which has summoned all of his old friends from their dismemberment, watery graves, and bloodslide keepsakes. It would later be revealed that in actuality, that he is in the midst of a turf war with the Estrada cartel, the same gang that killed Dexter's mother. Miguel intended to offer them to Dexter as a sacrifice, with the only catch that Dexter allow Miguel to be himself and have his run of the place, his own personal kingdom. While there are many people from Dexter's past that could play the role of his guardian angel, the role of Virgil, I always thought it best if it were Dokes, and I thought of that in an ironic way just because of the animosity that the two shared while Dokes was still alive. And again, you can pick from Harry, Deborah, Rita, but I think that those would all be obvious choices. I think that it'd be best if once the mask is off for Dexter and he can just be himself, there can be something of a bond that's actually broached between these two old foes. And along the lines of people who could have played Dexter's guardian angel, you could have even gone with Dr. Evelyn Vogel, the season 8 therapist, and she would serve as a counter to Emmett Meridian, the therapist that I previously mentioned. I always liked the idea and the potential of that character. We never knew Dexter's mother, either his biological mother or his step-parent. So for a woman to play that maternal figure, as well as from a psychological perspective, I always thought that was interesting. I wish, of the many failures of season 8, I felt that that was one of them. And to me, she served as a nice counterpoint to Harry, as Dexter's adopted father. Not to mention that, whereas Dexter's expertise is in blood spatter analysis, Dr. Vogel treats the mind like a crime scene to investigate the psyche. So I think that there would be a lot of potential there. Now, you're going to love this. In the multitude of villains, including minions, including sub-bosses, including the big bad, imagine, if you will, a whirlwind outside of your bedroom. That is how lust was depicted in the story of the Divine Comedy of Dante's Inferno. People were so swept up by the hunger of the flesh, that carnal desire. It was as if a whirlwind had completely picked them up and hurled them into the sky. While lovers would attempt to reach one another, the force of the wind would never allow them to get close, but never to embrace, and always separate them with a strong gust. In Dexter's Inferno, imagine burning hail. Why? Simple. Brian Moser would have hooked up with Lila West. Imagine that. The ice truck killer is in a torrid love affair with a pyromaniac. This would be a true Song of Ice and Fire, and just every bit as combustible. Those two would be something of a dynamic duo, but in the opposite. Whereas Batman and Robin had always done their utmost to fight against the criminal element, in this regard, you would have your closest version of the Joker and Harley Quinn. it's obvious that the Trinity Killer would be the big bad, and he would be the final villain. He would be that creature, that monster that Dexter has to get even with. Just that final piece of the puzzle that he needs to reconcile, this time with the knowledge of what it is that he's done and what it is that he's cost Dexter. Along the way, you wouldn't just fight off the criminal element of Dexter's past and Miami's worst, but along the way, you would actually encounter allies. Those integral connections and relationships that reminded Dexter of the good that he can do. I'm talking Lumen from season 5. I'm talking Isaac Serco. And in fact, Isaac Serco from season 7, he would use his mob connections to overturn Miguel's crime spree. I'm talking Jonah Mitchell, who happens to be the son of the Trinity Killer. Special Agent Frank Lundy, for instance. For me, Hannah McKay would be the wild card. She is Dexter's version of Poison Ivy, which is appropriate if you remember, because not only did she have a garden of her own, but poison was her choice of her instrument of murder. Of course, it can't all be the final bosses, because you would need several other smaller kinds of villains for Dexter to go up against. And for me, you have a number of fun villains from his past. Who can forget Little Chino from season 2? That would be a major hurdle once again for Dexter to deal with. But then you'd have to remember that Dexter would have to use his brains to overcome the overwhelming brawn of Little Chino. One interesting villain from season 7 would be Ray Speltzer, which, if you remember, this was the person who trapped Dexter in something of a labyrinth, and he wore the helmet of a minotaur. So imagine Dexter having to fight his way against this beast of a man while having to face a minotaur in a maze. Then, of course, there's the Rat Catcher from season 5, the serial killer who would eventually allow Dexter to cross paths with Lumen. This would be an interesting, more animalistic kind of character, spreading a type of vermin throughout the hellscape of Miami. Here's a curveball for all of you people, because whenever we think of Dexter villains, we think of, the season villain, or you think of the more notable serial killers from the first few seasons, the first half of the 8th season mainline series. But what about an enemy that hits too close to home? The Vice of Wrath, Paul Bennett, Rita's ex-husband. Then, of course, you would have the Estrada Cartel. They would play the role of Sloth, the Vice of Sloth, with opium dens all throughout that can, while Dexter's inhaling the mist of the drug usage that they have, it would kind of slow him down in his pursuits. Then you would have characters that I think are very much worthy or needing a redemption arc. Characters that weren't used to their potential. I mentioned Miguel Prado. For me, Stan Liddy, the dirty cop, the man who was played by RoboCop's Peter Weller, I always felt that an actor of his caliber should have had much more of an impact. And this game would be the perfect way of doing so, because what better of a character can you have in this hellscape of the mind of criminals than a dirty cop? Another character that I alluded to before was George King. You probably don't even know who it is that I'm referring to. Because Miguel Prado took up so much screen time and intrigue from season 3, you forgot that there was a serial killer on the loose who eventually came into the employ of Miguel Prado, something as an enforcer, which I always thought was interesting. But you never got to know much of the Skinner himself. As the name would suggest, this was someone who would take his trophies, whereas Dexter would use slides. His particular trophies were that of people's skin. So this would give him a chance to redeem himself in the sense of just being much more intriguing for this iteration going up against Dexter. Then, of course, there's Jordan Chase, the motivational speaker from season 5. I always felt that there should be much more limelight on him. And again, a good actor, a good concept, but I don't know. It just they did everything that they could, I feel, but there was something missing in order for this character to reach the upper echelon of Dexter villains. So I think that he would be, I mean, imagine fighting your way through all of these serial killers and mobsters and gangsters, and then you're hearing over the loudspeaker motivational speeches from Jordan Chase. In that way, he can kind of be like the Riddler character, someone really getting into not just Dexter's head, but that of other murderers throughout this location. Then, and this might receive some groans. Then there is Travis Marshall, the Doomsday Killer. Now, I would set him up so that he would have some connection to Trinity, given their mutual spirituality. Because remember, both Arthur Mitchell and Travis Marshall had that connection to religion. So to me, there's got to be something to an end of days religious fanatic hellbent on bringing doomsday to what is already hell on earth. To me, this and the fact that this was a character that was so lethal that he was outsmarting Dexter at every turn, and it required Dexter to eventually call in backup from Miami. There was so much about him that I feel was untapped, and yes, he does hail from the second worst season of Dexter, admittedly, but the concept on paper, I think, is something worth pursuing. And again, the fact that he has a religious connection, I think, whereas Dexter is something, he's an atheist. I think that there are plenty of pieces to his puzzle present that would make him an intriguing character and foil for Dexter. He's never going to be the main villain, but again, part of the premise of this synopsis is a redemption of Dexter, of the franchise, and several characters that never got their limelight. And I do think that there is potential with the Doomsday Killer. So from here, I already mentioned the Estrada cartel. One major hurdle for Dexter would be Santos Jimenez, the gang member who eventually received the orders to murder Dexter's mother. So here is something that the metaphysical and psychological nature of the game would allow for. Dexter would confront his dark passenger, something like Peter Pan's shadow. Now, this is not some pseudo-intellectual, melodramatic, existential crisis, but a genuine introspection, an analysis of whom really controls who. And for me, ultimately, it would be revealed that the psychological manifestation of the dark passenger, that urge, almost completely monopolizes the space in Dexter's mind. The trauma that he endured, he and his brother, nearly hollowed out Dexter entirely. But in doing so, it had taken nearly everything from Dexter: sensation, connection, communication. All of these facets of normal life have been stripped away from Dexter. But there is but a fraction of what is Dexter, or perhaps what was to be the man that remains. Now, a fraction may not sound like much, but in that kernel is love for his friends and family. That's where his affection for Harry lies. That's what compelled him to face the fire of Lila to save Rita's kids. That's the fury that he felt the loss of Rita. That's the sacrifice of his brother that he made for Deborah. That's the part of Dexter that is human. Yes, it is the dark passenger that keeps one hand on the wheel, but it's the code that drives Dexter. He realizes that while he's in the driver's seat, directing his course, speed, and direction, that the dark passenger is locked in the car with him. So Dexter's the one in control. To me, one thing that shockingly doesn't get referenced, or perhaps isn't even understood by many a YouTuber, critic, podcaster, Dexter is the story of a monster that attempted to become a man. So very much of him was peeled away and discarded in that shipping container. But without the code to contain and direct that inhuman urge, he would be every bit as bad as the trash that he takes out. Dr. Vogel even said in Season 8 that serial killers are nature's way of correcting itself. So I think that aspect should be explored. Yes, Dexter's mind, if you were to take an x-ray of it, it would the neurons and the centers of the mind that experience joy and sensation and connection, those are almost grayed out or blacked out entirely. But what remains, that tiny fraction that I discussed, that's where everything that is Dexter, that's where all of that lies, and that shouldn't be discarded. So yes, all of these things that Dexter could have been, all of these sensations, all of these experiences, all of this humanity that Dexter was denied was taken by the dark passenger. But in that small shell is everything that we know and love about the character, and it may not be much, and this is reflected in his shallow charisma, which is what he uses to get by, that mask that he wears in public so that no one can see the monster inside of him. Yes, that humanity is very much reduced, but it is and has been what has compelled him to do good for his deceased wife, to do good by his sister, to do good by his son. And that's ultimately what allows him to stand apart from these other carnivores that he hunts and preys upon. So, this has been my pitch meeting for how it is that I would have portrayed a Dexter's Inferno. For anyone interested, here is the original memo I jotted down for the game premise. As you can see, this was way back in 2013, which I believe is pretty fresh off of the ending of the show. So this was something that I put together back in the days before I did YouTube reviews, and this over 10 years ago. I'm so glad that I saved this. I hope one day this could be a thing. I hope one day that they would expand outside of the TV shows, and this would be a really great way of having another experience with Dexter. And this would serve as something of a curtain call for all of the memorable killers and characters that he's had to come across. And speaking of ye olden days, before I would do YouTube reviews, I believe some thanks are in order. Today is the 5-year anniversary of when I started doing movie reviews and when I started on YouTube and Rumble. So I couldn't have thought of a better way now that Dexter Resurrection has ended. Like I said, a banger of a season. I could not think of a better way of celebrating 5 years than to do this live stream pitch meeting of what absolutely is my favorite show. And like I said, for fresh off of a season that truly has been up there with some of the greats, this is the best that I have seen out of Dexter since season 7, which I still to this day, yes, season 6 was bad and so was 8. Lest we forget that season 7 really was the comeback kid. So much of it was great material there. So I wanted to extend my gratitude for all of my fans, for all of you fine folks on the many platforms that I do these live streams on. It really has been, it's been tough, especially with YouTube copyrights and whatnot, but at the same time, speaking of catharsis, it has been very cathartic doing these live streams, doing the Inquisition, doing watch parties. I really am grateful that I live in a time where I have all of these resources at my disposal. I have been speaking during my watch parties and live streams about my merchandise. I was speaking to not just my merch guy today in order to get that project underway with refining some designs, but once that is complete, I'm telling you, I have a number of goodies in store, a number of designs that I have been working towards and waiting on that I can't wait to own for myself, and I can't wait to show all of you fine fiends. So again, thank you for 5 years. I do have still a number of different projects in store and in mind. Halloween is around the corner. I distinctly remember when I started my channel that, my God, I did not want to debut in October because I wanted October obviously to be dedicated to the holiday that we all know and love. So I was aiming for August, and I eventually debuted in September, and I actually spoke to an editor of mine that I used to work with. So she reached out to me just yesterday. So I say all that to say that I have a number of really exciting projects on the horizon that I can't wait to share with all of you. So now let's get to what I have in store and in mind. So here is what's on the scene for the Mind's Eye, Inquisition, and the Greater Mind's Eye. So you have been treated to quite a few great Inquisition episodes lately. Last Friday, I uploaded a video called Smoke and Mirrors, which deals with Nia DaCosta's thoughts on her Candyman script that she's berating, despite the fact that she wrote, she's a partial writer on that same movie. I thought that was a self-snitch of the century, but I decided to give my thoughts on that. Additionally, Thursday was I went to catch The Conjuring Last Rites. So I did a preview and a reaction video, which I refer to as Precaution and Aftershock, respectfully. So, hello, 2546. I made sure to include all of that, and it was it's up on my channel now. It's my The Conjuring Last Rites Precaution and Aftershock, which I invite you to take a gander at. And let's see, I did a watch party for the 25th anniversary of Scary Movie a few weeks back, again, which I invite all of you. Hysterical. I mean, my God, I always say it, that film hails from a time that we could never go back to, with all just the level of raunchiness and political incorrectness. It is French, it's chef kiss, you know what I mean? And obviously, I invite you to take a look at Dexter Resurrection. I've done watch parties for episodes 1 through 10, so I would love to be the voice in your ear as your dark passenger while you watch those episodes. You can consider me your second screen experience. Now let's take a look at coming attractions. So, yesterday I did another episode of the Inquisition. Horror news stars on the red carpet. Today is obviously what I refer to as my K9, my Inkarnate 5th year anniversary. Obviously doing my pitch for Dexter's Inferno. Tomorrow will be a double feature on the watch party. I will do a watch party of Alien Earth as well as Wednesday. Thursday will be an interesting one. Thursday, there is an interactive horror film, which basically amounts to a interactive movie, or like a movie that you play like a video game, called Dead Reset. I will be playing that, and that's coming out on Steam. I will be playing that on Thursday. I'm really excited about that one. And there hasn't been much promotion about it. I found out about it by pure happenstance, and I said to myself, well, at first I didn't know what the hell I'm like, what am I looking at? Is this a watch party, or is this something from Mind Games? So, as I said, it's an interactive movie, so I'll treat it like a video game. So that will be up for the live stream on Thursday. Speaking of Mind Games, I will do my round 2 live stream of Withering Rooms. I didn't get to yesterday because I was doing the Horror News Inquisition episode, but that's what I have in store. So it's a full week of content for you fine fiends. Once again, thank you for 5 years. I hope you enjoyed this episode and found it interesting as Dexter fans. So, why is Mind's Eye Inquisition the place for heated debate? Because I ask the burning questions inquiring minds want to know. If you're resigned to your fate, time to subscribe to your fears.
Come and play with us. Forever and ever.
Are you talking about the monsters?
Monsters? They look like monsters to you?